A daughter beats her undead father to death with a mace in the rain. For him, there is no redemption arc. There is no last-minute forgiveness. She swings until he stops moving because that's what war demands, and Blizzard's latest, newest cinematic does not shy away from that. It absolutely sticks its landing. Blizzard released this recently. It's a character piece on the Adrin, who's a major character in Midnight, and it was so good that it reminded a lot of people what Warcraft really feels like at its best. And that matters because Warcraft's identity has felt mixed as of late. As I record this video, Midnight is quite literally upon us. So here is why this matters, why it matters to the story, why a lot of modern WoW has felt weird in terms of its story, and how this cinematic can be held up as a high bar for Blizzard to strive toward. I'll begin by getting something out of the way. If you felt like something's been off with WoW's tone, I think you would be right. Dragonflight, even though it had fantastic bits, like say the Blue Dragon quest line and lots of bright little sparks, it did in large part end up feeling like a children's show. Wooden dialogue, things that were saccharine and honestly puerile. The Imidrisil campaign had that Avengers Assemble moment that just made people physically cringe. And then the War Within gave us the likes of the Red Dawn questline. The War Within was a fragmented mess, but I want to hone in on Red Dawn, because a bit of it follows through into Midnight. That's because Eitrig, an orc who fought humanity in the First and Second Wars, and who was hunted down like a rat after the Horde fell, is a son of Lothar, all of a sudden. The Sons of Lothar being the very organization built to, destroy the Horde and take out his kind. One of its leaders, Danath Trollbane, was very recently his enemy. Danath bragged about killing orcs, and asked to throw Eitrig's corpse into the Stromgarde moat as recently as Battle for Azeroth. He suddenly shows up and is involved in the main campaign of Midnight. And the thing is, they don't show him having a change of heart. They don't show his development. No, what happened is his hatred, the uncomfortable parts of his past, were transplanted onto his niece in the Red Dawn questline. Then, it was just called character development. It allowed him to show up as a new dude who was older and wiser. But the thing is, we never got to see that development. And funnily enough, when you're doing a story, that bit's actually really important. It shouldn't happen off-screen, because it means that whenever Blizzard tries to have some big conclusion to their story and have their schmaltzy moment, well, it feels unearned. How many times have you looked at a modern WoW story beat and felt that it just felt unearned? That the orchestral swell in the music didn't really resonate with you, because it just didn't feel like Blizzard had laid the groundwork to get there. Now, this kind of thing has been building for years. Some of the marketing can feel quite cuddly. The quest writing, in particular, has felt safe. Characters who should be complicated get sanded down until they are inoffensive, and the stories keep resolving the same old way. But then Blizzard dropped all that is sacred. And they've had many fantastic cinematics recently. This one is particularly of note because of how damn good it is. Compare what you're looking at right now to that Imidrisil scene. Compare the Eitrig and Danath stuff, enemies for 30 years, now allies because the plot needs them to be, to this cinematic, one that does go to dark places where the Adrin kills her own father because some things can't be reconciled, some things can't be changed. Arthas took him out, he's a scourge now, she had to do that. I think the gap in the storytelling here is enormous. Some of that is because you're dealing with two different mediums, and a cinematic does get to be focused. But even though that is the case, this truly does matter. This video isn't about one bad questline. The pattern has been too consistent for that. And the thing is, when you have hundreds of people building a world and nobody really holding the line on what that world is supposed to feel like, well, everything drifts towards being safe, towards being inoffensive, towards similar resolutions every time. That has been happening. And the direction of that drift is specific. Blizzard's writers have maybe been mapping some of the modern values they hold directly onto the secondary world, rather than exploring those values through this secondary world. There's a huge difference between that and just mapping the values on. As an example, Tolkien built, say, Middle-earth with his values deeply baked in from the start. that works. The world is constructed around those principles. But what Blizzard's been doing as of late is retrofitting values onto a world that was built with a different internal logic, and I think the seams really do show. I would say, in a way, it's the Fukuyama problem applied to fiction. Francis Fukuyama argued that liberal democracy was, in a way, the end point of history. It was the final form. He was wrong on that. And to his credit, by the way, he did admit so. But the instinct that Fukuyama identified, that there is only one direction that things are allowed to move and it's forward, that's exactly what's happening to Warcraft storytelling. Grudges dissolve, enemies become friends, organizations founded in violence quietly rebrand into something more palatable, and the uncomfortable things are transplanted away to insane evil characters. It's really not been working. Arc after arc feels the same, and the universe becomes one note because the only permitted destination is reconciliation. Now, the thing is here, I am not disagreeing with Blizzard's values. I am not making any statements that are about politics or America or any of those things. What I'm talking about here is storytelling and how we construct our stories and our worlds. Just think about what all that does to a world that is actually called Warcraft. Now think about the likes of Warhammer 40k. It's unapologetically grim, it is brutal, it is dark. Maybe dark in some of the ways that certainly make World of Warcraft have a bit of a stroke. WoW isn't really doing things like, that big road paved with skulls leading up to the Dark Portal. But the thing is, at least when I look at the Warhammer fandom, progressive people from all different political walks of life absolutely love it. And I don't see demands that 40k moderates itself. I don't think anyone is demanding for the Imperium to learn to coexist with the Tyranids, or for sweeping imperial political reforms that move in the direction of unambiguously good progress. And the reason why is because a secondary world's identity is not an audience's politics. It's the internal rules of its fiction, and when those rules are respected, the fiction works for everyone. And the themes can be explored in a way that I feel lands far more robustly than when it's done in such a plain way, as they've so often done within Warcraft, whilst of course being rather milquetoast. Now, when you don't respect those rules, when you map one country's contemporary anxieties onto a world that is supposed to belong to everyone, that has a large global reach and audience, you end up getting something that feels less like art, more like therapy. I know there's a lot of subtlety that I could be missing in saying that statement so plainly, but I'm trying to get through this bit quickly because I really do want to glaze the hell out of this cinematic. I really do. That's most of the point of this video. And to be clear, this is not about opposing progress within the world. I don't oppose that progress, and that does include within World of Warcraft. The factions should develop. The races should evolve. Old enemies should be finding common ground as they move through the world and its problems together. All of that stuff can work when it is earned. And the bit that I take issue with is how it continually just happens, and in a way where it does not feel like it is being earned through the experience of the story that we players play through the game's quests. You see, when the fiction takes you through the struggle instead of skipping to the resolution, when that resolution emerges from the world's own logic after you playing through a big experience within that world, then it really works. So, all of that is to say that a fiction set in a different world should actually feel like a different world. And with that in mind, it is time to talk about all that is sacred. So, let's talk about the cinematic then. It really just got me engaged and invested. And it gets just about everything right. And I mean that at a deeper level than just saying, it's well animated, it's pretty. And it absolutely is. It's masterful, fantastic. But it works because it earns every single beat. You don't just learn what happened to Liadrin, you experience it. Every loss, every stage of disillusionment, every compromise, and by the time she tells Fowl who she is, you've been through it with her. And that is the difference. That is what I think Warcraft 3 was able to do by virtue of it being, a big old campaign, real-time strategy game, and that World of Warcraft has struggled with as it comes to MMO storytelling. And the team behind this cinematic really did go back to the source material, and that being Blood of the Highborn, which is the novella that defines Liadrin's backstory. And they respected the hell out of that. They adapted scenes directly from the novella faithfully and in ways that go beyond just a surface level callback. And that really matters. That's the difference between a cinematic that looks good and one that actually lands and deeply respects the lore. It opens warm. There is golden light. Young Liadrin with her adoptive father Vandalor at the Sunwell. Her birth parents were killed by trolls, you see. That's a detail that will likely matter for Midnight, given that, well, the elves and the Amani will be having a bit of a fun time together. But going back to the cinematic, Vandalor, High Priest of Kel'Thalas, took her in. You'll note as well that what he's wearing does match the Warcraft 3 priest. He raised her, and this is how she ends up becoming a priest. She takes after him. And the prayer he teaches her is quite specific. In a world that is cruel and unforgiving, I know the darkness can never prevail. This is not a generic blessing. It is a promise, and it's one you should remember because the cinematic is going to make you watch it not be true, because it ends up not being true. Now, one detail that's easy to miss here. Vandalor calls the Sunwell a font of energy, not a font of light. And that's because it doesn't become one until the Burning Crusade, whenever they place the heart of Muru inside it. So it's nice that the cinematic gets those little details right. Back to our story, because then Arthas comes. We see the fall of Silvermoon. The palette shifts to red. Liadrin's fleeing through the chaos. Vandalor falls. An abomination drives a sickle through his chest. That's straight from the novella, by the way. He has risen up, and of course, not as himself. Rather, he is puppeted flesh. He is something that is wearing his face. And then he speaks. Liadrin hears her father's voice coming from a dead mouth. And again, that quote, "Darkness can never prevail." And when we see Liadrin act and respond to this, we see that she does not use the light. She can't, because by this point, her faith is already breaking. The man who taught her that darkness can never prevail just got ripped apart by the scourge while that prayer played over the scene. She's watching that promise, at least for him, break in real time. So she kills this undead Vandalor, this undead adoptive father, the only way that she can, physically, with a mace. There's no magic, no divine stuff. She just beats the corpse of her adopted father until it stops moving. She has no choice. She has to do that. I guess she could try to run away. She could lie down and die. But no, that moment faced her and she did what she had to do. And the cinematic gives that moment the weight that it deserves. We see a blood-red sky, rain, no cutaway, no soft focus and things. She does it. The cinematic shows you it. And it intercuts it with her childhood laughter. It really leans into the cruelty and the horror of that scene for that character. Now, they don't show the decapitation directly. They show her cradling his covered head, which I suppose is almost worse. And then we get 5 years alone in the Ghostlands. We see sickly green, dead trees, silence, that her faith doesn't waver, that in fact it's basically gone. And we see then how the Blood Knights didn't really form out of devotion. In a way, they formed out of spite, anger, a desire for revenge. They didn't ask the light for help, remember. The Blood Knights took its power, and they did that by chaining the Naru, Muru, and siphoning its power. But here's what the cinematic doesn't shy away from, and what most people maybe wouldn't know, which is that this was not clean. Every time they channeled the light through Muru, they heard screaming in their heads. They got debilitating headaches. And this was on top of the magical withdrawal they were experiencing because the Sunwell was destroyed, meaning that every Blood Elf is literally experiencing magical addiction withdrawal at its worst. They're not framed as conquerors seizing power when it comes to the formation of the Blood Knights. They are a broken people forcing a tool to work because faith failed them and they need something in a world that has proven it's out to kill them. And this isn't even the only time Liadrin has to destroy someone that she loves. Her apprentice, Galel, her closest friend, someone the novella shows clearly cares about her deeply, cracks under the strain of the Blood Knight training and attacks her. She ends up having to kill him too. Decapitates him. It's brutal. That's me bringing in some additional lore. The cinematic chose to only show the most pivotal loss, but I think knowing there were other hard things for this character to go through does change how you hear everything she says later. And the thing is, the cinematic doesn't frame any of this as being heroic. It doesn't frame it as being villainous either. It sits in discomfort. It's complicated, it's messy, and to me anyway, it feels the best of Warcraft. I certainly remember experiencing Blood Elves in the Burning Crusade. I liked the edge that they had. It felt right. It felt distinct. And even though it could mean that the Blood Elves could act in some pretty damn villainous ways, to me, they were understandable, sympathetic villains. It made sense. And I think if you take a look at many who love the Blood Elves, they have often felt disappointed in how the edge of the Blood Elves has been sanded off over time. It is good then that this cinematic exists as a reminder of that, and even better, a contemporary reminder of that. Now, I need to talk about the Scarlet Crusade fight. Just claps, firm handshakes to everyone involved. It is a proper fight. It's great. There are bodies, there's fire, people die. It's a visual feast. The action is fantastic. And there's an irony the cinematic doesn't underline, but I think absolutely knows it's there. The Scarlet Crusade, a human-only order built on fanaticism, gets torn apart by an elf and an undead wielding the light better than any of them can. And taking a look at, say, how Alonsis uses the light, man, I would really take a melee DPS priest, because that shit looked really cool. And now the present day framing. And this is where the cinematic does something quite brilliantly. Perhaps quietly brilliantly. Aloysius Fowl, himself an undead, walks with Liadrin through ruins scarred by the Scourge. And Fowl is a deliberate mirror to Vandalore, both undead, but of course Fowl is in a different situation. He is not a mind-controlled Scourge. He can still wield the light. Doing so causes him pain. One of the amazing bits of Warcraft's lore when it comes to undead light users. But of course, something literally not possible for Vandalore whenever he was turned. Val's very existence is a bit of an unanswered question for Liadrin. Why him? Why not her father? And what does that say about the light? And maybe, had she have ran away and allowed her father to be a shambling ghoul for a while, and maybe when things with Arthas turn, time goes on, could he have been saved? That's the kind of question that will exist in the mind of a character like this. And of course, Val knows her history. He knows about the Blood Knights. He knows the things that she has done. And his line, quote, "Some sought retribution for all the suffering they had endured. Others tried to bury their pain beneath armor. But it was those who did not find peace in the light who became the most dangerous." That is, yes, a philosophical point that he's making. It's also an intervention. He's describing a darker path she could go in, and I suppose he's seeing how she will react. And we see that she does not flinch. She says, "I became a paladin for every reason you said. Loss, despair, retribution." That's great. She's not denying, she's not spinning. She completely owns it. And given what we know, not just Vandalore, but also Galel, her parents, the Blood Knights for years, you could say she's almost understating it. She is dangerous because of what's happened to her, not in spite of it. And the cinematic treats that as being true without treating it as being wrong, because it does a great job of landing her lived experience, the horrors she's went through as a character. That's why it works so well. And the Sunwell climax too works because it's ambiguous. I'm talking about the main Midnight cinematic now, the one where she prays at the Sunwell and good things happen, ostensibly. We can now think to ourselves, did the light answer her faith? Or did it pragmatically respond to the void? Because the void was threatening its interests. That cinematic doesn't tell you, and I think it combines fantastically with this one, giving us a strong ambiguity. One that just feels authentic, and I suppose the tone of Warcraft 3 is something that just really rang true for me as I was watching this cinematic. And it is a narrative draw that I don't feel I have got from the questing content of World of Warcraft for quite some time indeed. Now, I know there's another angle on things where, you know, galloping abs, sweaty orcs, Warlords of Draenor cinematic, give us big, rad, awesome, actiony things. And you know what? I'm down for all of that stuff. That's fine. But why I really wanted to bring this up is because this cinematic got all the spectacle, got all those things right, but it handled the characters and the theme so damn well, and it scratched itches that the game I log into often fails to do, and sometimes in fairly disappointing ways. And it's clear to me many feel this way. I definitely can't say that it's everyone, and if you disagree entirely and you think this is just me having some cope or just going off on my own theory, that is totally fair. It's totally fair. We can still be friends. There's no need for us to do the narcissism of small differences against each other. You know, we're all on the same team. I just think, look, this is the tone of Warcraft 3. I think this kind of thing is what people are actually mourning when they say that WoW doesn't feel like Warcraft as much anymore. We did a video covering things like this a few months ago, and like over 200,000 of you watched it, and did see pretty broad agreement. Not everyone, but I know at least this has not been a niche complaint, and I think this is the ultimate answer to it. In 2026, it's an example of what I think Warcraft has been missing, done near perfectly. Now, that's not to say that there have not been good spots over the last 5-10 years. There absolutely has been. But man, I think about Farak the Everblazing. I think about the Avengers scene. I think about Red Dawn. I think about a lot of those stories. I look at this cinematic, and I do think to myself, is this the same IP? Is this the same game? One of them feels right. The other one just doesn't. Where are we at then? Well, this cinematic is one good thing. One good thing. It does not fix the quest writing. It doesn't undo how I think they've handled Eitrig and the Sons of Lothar stuff in a very ham-fisted way. It doesn't retroactively make the Red Dawn questline any less embarrassing. And from what I've seen in Midnight, there's lots of great story stuff. Seems there's a lot of really big, cool moments set up. But I also do see many of the same problems. But I think this does show that the storytelling capability is there whenever there is appropriate direction. And that's one of the benefits a cinematic like this will have, that the main game just can't have, by virtue of how both of them are made in completely different ways, with completely different scale teams and completely different pipelines. And yes, cinematics have often been Blizzard's best foot forward, but I'm not saying that this is just a quality gap between the cinematic team and the quest team. What I'm saying is that it's a storytelling philosophy gap. I think here, one team has trusted the fiction. I think the other has more often than not kept on smoothing it out. Just somewhere inside Blizzard, a team understood that a character forged by violence and loss is more interesting than a character who has moved past those things. And the bit that matters far more than the destination that character gets to, which sure, if that's healing and that's progress, I'm all for that. The bit that matters, the bit that defines so many great stories, is going through that experience with that character. That's where I think a lot of the mark has been missed. Moral ambiguity is more compelling than moral clarity. A world called Warcraft should have a tone of loss, struggle, and war. And in having that, the warmer moments, which I know Blizzard deeply loves, those will feel all the more warm. So my ask isn't complicated. Explore the universe's identity from new angles, don't flatten it. Let characters grow, but do so without losing their rough edges. Let factions evolve without becoming indistinguishable from each other. Let violence be a legitimate resolution to problems in a world that has always been defined by it. Because in the world of Warcraft, with the setup of this world and the factions, it just doesn't map on to our current world and our current moral progress. A progressive character in Warcraft probably should feel at times a bit regressive to our modern lens, because it is a world that is rooted in medieval fantasy. It's rooted in a world where so many of the societal, moral, etc., developments of our current world have not existed yet. So when it feels like they've came through a portal from the future, instead of being authentically developed within Warcraft, and for that world, then they don't ring as true, even if they may feel good to write. And all that is why a daughter beat her father to death with a mace in the rain. It's horrible and depressing, and it's probably one of the best things Blizzard have released in years. It is in the S tier. More of this. I don't mean this as a baton to beat the shit out of the game with. I think this is something to hold up as an example. In an ideal world, it's something so good that storytellers can rally around it and feel confident that they can go to places that the game has often struggled to. Okay, big old video, great cinematic, more of that please, and oh my god, Blizzard, if you guys could get stuff like this, but like as a TV series, oh, we'd really be cooking. I mean, could you imagine a anthology of, I don't know, maybe 23-minute episodes, do 10 of them a season, and, you could just have a season be The Rise of Arthas, another one be The Fall of Arthas. You could go through so many of the biggest moments in Warcraft that have their narrative beats mapped out, that are huge archetypical stories that we know resonate with the masses, and give them what they deserve. I never thought I'd give a shit about a character like Liadrin as much as this cinematic was able to make me. So, bravo. It's great. Go watch it if you haven't watched it, by the way. And if you'd like to see how Blizzard are thinking about the world revamp, watch this video next, because on that topic, they have changed their tune.